Hello, this is Allie. I'm here to talk to you today about HTML entities. HTML entities, what are they? Entities are a string or a piece of text used to display reserved characters, which would be interpreted by HTML as code, or characters and symbols that are difficult to type with a standard keyboard. The correct syntax for representing an entity is the ampersand symbol, the name of the entity, and a semicolon, or the ampersand symbol, number, and a semicolon. Ampersand, that may be a new word for you. It's pronounced ampersand. I'm going to tell you a little bit more about ampersand in order to help you remember what it's called and how to pronounce it. So, ampersand is probably a familiar character to you, and it derives from a symbol that was used in place of the Latin word et, which also means and. In the late Middle Ages, single letters were used as words. Words like I were, when spelled, incorporated into a phrase that clarified that they were, in fact, individual words. For I, the phrase was I per se I, which in Latin means I by itself is the word I. In the early list of the alphabet, V was followed by the symbol and, which was rendered and per se and, meaning and by itself is the word and. Over the years, that phrase, when spoken aloud, was pronounced and per se and was shortened by English speakers to ampersand. And that is the pronunciation that we use today to correctly identify that symbol. So, back to entities. When do we use them? So the most common time that you may use entities is to add a symbol or a special character to your HTML. For example, the trademark symbol, copyright, registered mark, any of those specialized symbols would be represented using an entity. Entities are also used for reserved symbols. In HTML, we use the less than and greater than signs to identify tags. We use semicolons to identify the end of a string or a command, and we often use the forward slash, backslash, and ampersand to identify different things in HTML that are beyond what the symbols are themselves. So if you were to try to type those characters, they would not show up in your HTML the way you would want. They would instead be interpreted by the browser trying to use them as markup. Another time you would use entities is for letters that are not available on a standard keyboard. This might be for specialized letters that appear in foreign language words or to correct a pronunciation, but we will get into that a little bit more later on in our presentation. So, now that we know what entities are, how do we use them? Well, it's quite simple. They're inserted directly into the text. So we can use them by memorizing which entity responds to which character, or we can use a reference sheet because there are a lot of entities. So for common ones that you may use often, you will probably memorize them over time. For those that you may not use very often, there are plenty of reference sheets online, and I will provide links to them, to some of the best ones at the end of this presentation. Now there are two formats to insert your entity. If you remember, we talked about entity with a number and then an entity with a name. The number format is the most widely supported across all browsers. However, they're very difficult to remember. The entity name format is much easier to remember, but may not have as wide a support. So depending on which type of entity you're using and what your goal is, you may prefer to use the number format over the name format if you want to ensure compatibility across the largest number of browsers. Here are some examples of some of the most common entities that you may use. So the first that we see is the /. So that is represented by the ampersand, SOL, and a semicolon. Now for the backslash is the ampersand, BSOL, and a semicolon. For our less than and greater than symbols, they're quite easy to remember with the name because it is just ampersand, LT semicolon for less than, and ampersand, GT semicolon for greater than. For the copyright and register marks, those are also quite easy to remember with their names. Ampersand copy semicolon will render the copyright mark, and ampersand reg, REG semicolon, will show the registered trademark symbol. If you want to show an ampersand on your page, then you use the ampersand symbol, AMP semicolon, and that will display as an ampersand in your text. To do a semicolon, you do ampersand semicolon. So here is an example of where you would put an ampersand in the code with a window showing what the code would look like when rendered by the browser into your web page. So you can see that we have each of those most common symbols and entities listed in our top section here. We have the ampersand with the ampersand AMP semicolon. We have a less than with the ampersand LT semicolon. We have a greater than with an ampersand GT semicolon. And then we get into some quotation marks. So the double quotation mark is represented by ampersand QUOT semicolon. And a single quotation mark or an apostrophe is ampersand APOS semicolon. Now some of the symbols that we've already discussed were the copyright and the registered trademark. So ampersand copy semicolon shows us that copyright mark, and the ampersand REG semicolon shows us that registered trademark symbol. Now there are some fun symbols that you can include taking advantage of the entities, and that would be ampersand star semicolon for a star, ampersand hearts semicolon for a heart, ampersand spades for a semicolon for a spade, ampersand clubs semicolon for clubs, and ampersand DIAMS semicolon for diamond. Now, the diacritical marks are symbols added to letters, they're also often called accents. So this is an example of where the entities would help you to represent a accent letter beyond just the symbol. Now the syntax for these are a little bit different because you would do the letter that you would like to add an accent to, then ampersand, then the number, and then semicolon. So you can see here that for A and for O, we have listed several accents, and the accent number represents the symbol that is above the letter, and then the letter itself is what's listed before the ampersand mark. Now you will notice that for A, it is listed in a lowercase, and the result is listed in lowercase. And the O is listed in uppercase, and the O with the symbol is also listed in uppercase. Please remember that these are case sensitive. So depending on if you need a lowercase letter or an uppercase letter, when you type your entity, be sure to use the correct case. Here are some additional resources that I have found that provide great examples and reference sheets for entities. if there's a specific one you need to look up, these will be a great resource to identify what they are so that you don't need to memorize all of the entities. I will quickly show you what you can find on each of these pages. The first resource listed here is easy to see and use as it shows each of the different entities in a large format. You can scroll through and you can see there are hundreds of different entities that you can use. Now you'll notice that if you are hovering your mouse over the entity, it will show you the name, if there is one available, and two different number formats that you can use. Depending upon the compatibility of the browsers that you're programming for, may determine which of those formats you would use to insert your entity into your HTML. The second resource that I've included is here. It lists all of the entities in a table. Now this format may be easier for you to read if you're scrolling through everything as alphabetical, whereas on the other sheet, they were listed more in order of commonality, what you would use most common. On the second entity resource, you can see the character is listed here. The entity name, if there is one, is listed here. The number is listed here, and the description is listed here. These are also separated into categories. So here we have our ASC2 characters. And if you scroll down, here are our ICO 88591 characters. And you can see symbols that include different currencies, math symbols, and Greek letters. There's all sorts of different entities that you can use to enhance and better communicate what you're trying to portray on your web pages. I hope that this has helped you to understand entities a little bit more and when you would use them in your HTML and web page design. Thank you very much and have a nice day.